Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning into this story. If you enjoy my videos and want to see more, show the channel some support and let me know in the comments what I could improve or add next time. Now let's get started. I kept the wheel straight and pushed harder on the accelerator because 3 infected were already close enough to strike the rear windows. One hit the glass with both hands and stayed beside us for several steps. Another came out of the service tunnel behind it, moving fast despite a torn uniform shirt and one badly swollen knee. Monique Price stood beside the wall controls with one hand on the security shutter switch. She waited until the rear bumper passed the yellow floor line, then held the switch down. The metal shutter dropped behind me. One infected reached the opening before it closed and struck the bottom panel hard enough to make Monique step away. The shutter continued down until it hit the concrete. I braked beside 2 baggage tractors and shut off the shuttle engine. The bus was empty. We had used it to block the widest vehicle opening between the baggage service area and the part of the terminal we were abandoning. Everybody else was already farther inside the north concourse. Monique checked the shutter without touching it. The infected on the other side kept hitting the metal. She said, "That motor will not hold the door against repeated impacts if the lower track bends. We need something heavy in front of it before we leave." I restarted the bus, turned it across the opening, and backed until the rear bumper touched a concrete column. There was no room to drive it out again without moving the baggage tractors first. That was fine. We were not planning to reopen that route. Monique climbed through the passenger door. I shut the engine down for the second time, took the keys, and followed her between the baggage carts. We had been using the main ticketing hall for 3 days. It had looked defensible when there were more than 60 of us. There were public entrances we could watch, restaurants close by, restrooms, security checkpoints, and enough open floor to sleep without being on top of each other. Then people started leaving in small groups. Some went looking for family, some tried to reach the parking garages. Some followed a police convoy when it passed the airport road. By that morning, we were down to 11 adults. 11 people could not watch the curb doors, baggage exits, employee corridors, loading areas, escalators, parking bridges, and the glass frontage of a ticketing hall built for thousands of passengers. The infected had already found 2 ways inside. The first group came through a damaged revolving door near the airline counters. We stopped them before they reached the center of the hall. The second came through baggage handling. That second route ended the argument. Monique had spent 14 years cleaning the terminal. She knew employee doors that were not shown on passenger maps. She knew which fire doors latched mechanically and which depended on powered magnetic locks. She knew which shutters had their motors above the ceiling and which could be lifted if the lower track was damaged. When she told us the ticketing hall had too many ways into it for 11 people to control, nobody had a better answer. So we moved. The north concourse connected to the terminal through 1 security checkpoint, 2 employee corridors, 1 baggage service corridor, and a set of escalators leading down toward baggage claim. It had 16 passenger gates, restaurants, restrooms, offices, utility rooms, and wide windows facing the apron. It also had fewer approaches from the public side. That was enough. We reached the central gate area, carrying whatever we had saved during the move: backpacks, bottled water, tools. A pharmacy tote Priya Desai guarded more closely than anything else we owned. Food from 3 restaurants, 2 extinguishers, radios, blankets from an airline storage room, batteries, a bolt cutter that had already proven less useful than people expected. Saul Whitaker sat on a baggage cart beside the checkpoint with his left hand wrapped in clean gauze. Saul was an airport firefighter. He had injured the hand during the second day when an emergency exit slammed against it while he was trying to close a corridor. Priya had cleaned and dressed the cuts, but 2 fingers were badly swollen and he could not grip hard with that hand. That changed more than Saul wanted to admit. He knew the fire station. He understood parts of the airfield. He knew emergency radio procedures and enough about airport systems to tell us when we were about to do something dangerous. But knowing how to do a task did not mean he could perform it one-handed. He had to explain things and let other people do the physical work. The rest of us had similarly narrow skills. Renee Collins managed a restaurant in the terminal and knew which storage rooms belonged to which food service company. Brett Lawson maintained baggage equipment. Kimber Doyle worked airline gates and had operated passenger boarding bridges for 7 years. Marcus Bell handled bags and ground equipment. Diane Webb had been an accounting clerk traveling home from a conference, but she turned out to be the person who could keep a written inventory without losing track of what people had already taken. Priya was a pharmacy resident. She could manage medication, basic wounds, fever, dehydration, and some common medical problems. She corrected people whenever they started treating her as the group's doctor. I was 36 and drove a shuttle for an airport hotel. I knew the curb lanes, hotel roads, loading zones, parking entrances, service roads I was allowed to use, and what our buses could get through. That was my contribution. Nobody in our group could fly an airplane. Nobody could run the control tower. Nobody could turn airport fuel into a useful resource by looking at equipment and guessing. Accepting those limits kept us alive more than once. The first job inside the concourse was closing the checkpoint. We parked baggage carts across the passenger lanes, then rolled 2 heavy stainless steel preparation tables from a closed restaurant behind them. Marcus brought a baggage tractor through an employee access door and positioned it sideways behind the tables. We did not depend on any one barrier. If somebody got through the checkpoint shutters, the carts would slow him. If he moved the carts, the tables blocked the lane. If he got around the tables, the tractor still narrowed the passage enough for 2 people to watch it. The employee corridor beside the checkpoint was harder. The door had an electronic badge reader. Monique looked at it and said, "Do not assume locked means locked after power changes. That one fails open during certain emergency conditions." We pushed a vending machine in front of it. Moving the machine took 6 of us, 2 furniture dollies, and almost 20 minutes. It made enough noise to carry through the concourse. We stopped twice and listened. Nothing came. That did not mean the area was clear. Fresh infected were still inside offices, parked aircraft, utility rooms, and sections of terminal that had been locked during the first evacuation. We had learned that the airport could preserve danger. Outside streets emptied. People moved. Infected followed traffic, crowds, alarms, and visible movement. Inside the airport, a person could stay trapped behind a locked office door for days. When the door opened, the infected person could still move fast. We started checking rooms in pairs. Nobody went alone. Kimber took us to the farthest passenger gate first, because its boarding bridge could connect directly to an aircraft. No airplane was parked there, but the bridge was extended halfway toward the apron. She shut the bridge controls down and showed Marcus where the mechanical door latch sat. The small room behind the gate desk looked empty. Then Brett heard movement inside a storage closet. We did not open it. There was no useful reason to clear every enclosed space immediately. Monique marked the door with black tape, and we pushed a file cabinet in front of it. That became one of our first rules. Closed and contained was often better than open and investigated. At the next gate we found a man in an airline vest, locked inside the jet bridge. He struck the glass when he saw us. He had dried blood on the front of his shirt, but we could not tell whether it belonged to him. He could still run the length of the bridge. He hit the terminal door repeatedly, then moved away when we backed out of sight. Kimber disconnected power to that bridge and locked the terminal side door. We left him there. There was nowhere he could go without somebody opening a door for him. The baggage corridor was different. We needed it. Brett explained that the baggage system under the concourse connected several mechanical rooms and loading positions. It gave us an interior route from the gate area toward the service side, without using the glass passenger corridors. It could also let infected approach without being visible until they were close. We entered through a staff door beside a baggage elevator. The conveyors were silent. Thousands of bags remained where the system had stopped. Some sat on belts. Others had fallen between equipment. Plastic tubs, straps, jackets, and loose luggage covered parts of the floor. Brett kept pointing out pinch points and low machinery. He said, "If power comes back unexpectedly, nobody touches a belt until I isolate it. Half this equipment can move without giving us enough warning." He found the local disconnects and shut down the sections we intended to walk through. Marcus and I followed the painted vehicle lane. About halfway to the first loading room, something struck a metal baggage container behind us. We turned. A woman in a security uniform came around the corner at a run. Marcus pushed an empty cart sideways. She hit it and tried to climb over. We backed away while Brett pulled a fire door release. The door dropped between us and the infected woman. She reached the opening before it closed and got one arm underneath. The safety edge detected the obstruction and reversed. The door rose again. Monique had warned us about powered doors doing things people did not expect. Marcus dragged the cart backward and pinned it against the wall. I used a long baggage pole to keep the infected woman beyond the threshold, while Brett found the emergency stop. The fire door descended again. This time it stayed down. The banging continued for several minutes. We marked that door too. By late afternoon we had cleared one baggage route from our concourse to a service exit near the hotel shuttle lane. We closed the branches we did not need. Brett cut power to 2 conveyors. Monique marked the safe route with arrows made from white cleaning tape. The route was ugly, dark, and narrow in places. It was also ours. Our first night inside the concourse showed us how much of the building remained outside our control. At a little after midnight, the fire alarm started. There was no smoke. The alarm came from somewhere beyond our sealed checkpoint. The speakers in the ceiling activated throughout the concourse. Emergency strobes began flashing. Several magnetic fire doors released at once. One of the doors we had expected to stay open slammed shut between the gate area and our food storage. Another door near the employee corridor unlocked. Monique was already moving before most of us had stood up. She shouted, "Watch the service corridor. The alarm state changes the locks." Marcus and I reached the corridor while Brett went for the electrical room. The vending machine still covered most of the employee door, but the latch had released. The door moved half an inch every time something pushed from the other side. We heard at least one person hitting it. Marcus drove the baggage tractor forward until its front frame pressed against the vending machine. The door stopped moving. The alarm continued. It was loud enough to make normal conversation impossible. We could see movement outside through the windows. 3 infected crossed the apron from the direction of a ground service building. One stopped near a baggage cart, turned toward the terminal, and started running. The others followed. They reached the glass below us and struck it. Airport glass was strong. It was not something we intended to test for hours. Saul found a portable radio and told us the alarm panel showed a detector activation in the old ticketing side of the terminal. Nobody knew whether smoke, damage, water pressure, or an actual fire had triggered it. We had no reason to go find out. Brett and Monique isolated the local speakers after checking with Saul that we were not disabling the entire fire detection system. The strobes stopped in our section. The infected outside remained near the windows for another 40 minutes before movement farther across the apron drew 2 of them away. One stayed. He stood near the glass until morning. The same alarm had changed our ventilation. Air stopped coming from several ceiling vents. The temperature in 2 enclosed gate rooms climbed quickly once people started sleeping there. Then the emergency lights dimmed. Some stayed on. Some went out. Some fixtures switched to a different circuit several minutes later. Nobody in our group understood the whole building. That became another rule. We stopped trying to keep the terminal operating normally. We supported only the pieces we could understand and sustain. The next morning, Monique led us to the maintenance access above the restaurants. We reached the roof through a locked stairwell she opened with a custodial master key. There were several mechanical units up there, and more rooftop equipment than I could identify. One emergency generator served part of the concourse. It was not the airport's main backup system. It had its own enclosure, fuel supply, transfer switch, and maintenance panel. Brett inspected it without pretending he knew every part. The generator was running. Its fuel gauge was below half. We did not know how accurate the gauge was. Saul said the fire station kept records on emergency equipment and might have manuals or maintenance contacts, but the station itself was outside our controlled area. Renee asked the question everybody was thinking. How long does half a tank give us? Brett answered, I cannot give you a number until I know the load and the tank capacity. The useful answer is that we are wasting power right now. So we started cutting loads. Decorative lights went first, then advertising displays, then half the gate monitors. We shut off restaurant equipment we did not need, emptied 2 refrigerated cases into one walk-in cooler, and stopped using powered escalators. Renee made the food decisions. Fresh meat that had stayed cold was cooked first. Dairy went next. Frozen food remained frozen, only while the freezer remained one of our supported loads. Nobody talked about having months of airport food. Most restaurants received frequent deliveries because storage space cost money. A concourse serving thousands of passengers could still have surprisingly little food behind the counters once regular deliveries stopped. We had plenty of chips, candy, nuts, crackers, and bottled drinks. We had less actual meal food than the public shelves suggested. Renee counted everything. Diane wrote it down. Then they counted it again. Priya did the same with medicine. The pharmacy kiosk near the terminal had been emptied during the evacuation, but we had taken what remained from first aid cabinets, airline kits, a restaurant office, and several abandoned bags after checking identification and leaving personal papers in place. Pain medicine, antihistamines, bandages, antiseptic solution, a limited number of antibiotics that Priya refused to hand out without a clear reason, medication for several common conditions. Almost none of it solved major trauma. Saul's hand was the most serious injury we had. Priya changed the dressing twice a day and watched for increasing redness, drainage, fever, and loss of movement. His fingers stayed swollen. He could move them. That was enough for her not to change treatment. Water became the larger problem. The taps still worked. Monique did not expect that to continue. She said municipal pressure had already dropped once during the previous night. Parts of the terminal used booster pumps. Other sections depended more directly on city pressure. If power disappeared elsewhere in the system, or a major main broke, the taps could stop without warning. We collected containers. Restaurant drink dispensers were useless without syrup and carbon dioxide systems, but their water connections still ran. Stockpots helped. Food-grade storage tubs helped. Every clean bottle helped. Renee found sealed beverage containers in a storage room. Marcus found airline water jugs near a service closet. We filled them while pressure remained. We also drained water from 2 properly maintained hot water tanks after Saul and Brett identified which units served the restaurant plumbing. Priya made us keep drinking water separate from anything used for cleaning or toilets. That distinction became harder to enforce once everybody started carrying containers. Diane labeled them. By the end of the second day in the concourse, every useful container had a strip of tape telling us what it held. Drinking, cooking, cleaning, unknown. Unknown water stayed out of our mouths. Sanitation changed immediately. We stopped flushing after every use. We closed most restrooms and kept one bank near the sleeping area. Later, when pressure weakened again, we used non-potable water collected from maintenance sources for flushing. Monique found floor drains that still worked, and told us which janitorial sinks connected to the same waste system. Nobody enjoyed discussing waste. Everybody learned quickly because the alternative was worse. The windows became our next problem. The north concourse had long walls of glass from floor level almost to the ceiling. They gave us excellent visibility across the apron, taxiways, and parts of the runway. They also exposed light and movement at night. We moved our sleeping area into interior gate rooms and the corridor behind 2 restaurants. We hung dark fabric inside selected windows, using advertising banners and airline blankets. We did not cover everything. We needed sight lines. During daylight, we kept 2 observation positions near the glass. At night, we used the interior side of the concourse and kept visible lighting low. Nobody had to explain why after the fire alarm incident. The infected outside had shown us. On the 5th morning, Saul asked me to take him to the airport fire station. He knew a route along the service road that avoided the main terminal frontage. I knew how to reach it with a hotel shuttle, without crossing active runways. Marcus came because he could drive the smaller ground vehicles. Priya objected to Saul going with us. He answered, "I can tell Grant where equipment is and which cabinets are worth opening. Sending somebody else to guess would keep them outside longer." Priya accepted that on one condition. Saul would not use his injured hand for lifting. We took the smaller hotel shuttle because I knew its condition and had the keys. Marcus drove a baggage tractor behind us, carrying an empty equipment cart. The service road was clear for the first half mile. There were abandoned catering trucks, luggage carts, maintenance vans, and private cars near employee parking entrances. Some had doors open. We did not stop. The fire station sat beyond 2 maintenance buildings with a direct airfield exit. One bay door was open. A fire vehicle stood halfway outside. Saul told me to stop before we reached the apron. We watched for several minutes. Nothing moved. Then an infected firefighter appeared behind the truck. He was slower than the people we had seen during the first days. Saul watched him approach. The man dragged one foot and had dried blood along one side of his uniform. When he got close enough to see the shuttle clearly, he accelerated. Not fast enough to catch us. Fast enough to confirm that injured infected could still be dangerous. I backed the shuttle away while Marcus drove the baggage tractor around the opposite side of the building. The infected firefighter followed me. Marcus stopped beside a fenced equipment area and shut off his tractor. I continued another 100 yards, turned, and moved slowly until the infected man was well away from the fire station. Then I accelerated. I circled back through a separate service lane. By the time the infected firefighter turned toward the engine noise, Marcus had closed the equipment gate behind him. Saul showed us a staff entrance. His badge still worked on local backup power. We entered. The station smelled of old food, damp gear, and fuel from the apparatus bays. We found nobody alive. We also found no hidden group waiting to attack us. Most rooms were empty. One interior office was locked from inside and had blood beneath the door. We left it closed. Saul directed us to supplies we could actually use: protective gloves, face shields, basic medical equipment, portable work lights, batteries, hand tools, 2 airfield radios, several lengths of heavy hose that were useful for water transfer only if we had a source and pump. We did not take breathing equipment because none of us had a reason to enter smoke-filled buildings. We found printed airfield diagrams and emergency contact sheets. Saul took those. In a maintenance office, Brett's name appeared on an inspection roster from months earlier, which later helped him identify which generator contractor had serviced our concourse. The phone numbers were useless. The equipment notes were not. Saul also found fuel records. The fire vehicles used diesel from a controlled airport supply point. That did not give us fuel. The pump required power and an access key we did not have. A handwritten note mentioned a temporary maintenance tank near the cargo side of the airport. That was the first time the cargo group became useful to us. We saw them before they saw us. A pickup truck crossed a service road near the cargo warehouses. There were 2 adults inside. The truck stopped when its driver noticed our shuttle. A man stepped out holding a rifle pointed toward the pavement. He did not aim at us. I stopped more than 50 yards away. Saul used the radio. After several attempts, the man answered on an airport operations channel. His name was Victor Rains. He had been an airline maintenance supervisor. 11 people were staying around a cargo maintenance building and adjoining warehouse. Their section had fewer windows than ours, heavy vehicle doors, fenced yards, and access to the temporary diesel tank Saul had read about. Victor asked how many people we had. Saul answered. Victor said, "We are not combining camps. Your terminal has too many entrances, too much glass, and too many people moving through it." I almost laughed at the last part, because there were only 11 of us. Then I understood his point. A passenger terminal attracted survivors. Cargo buildings did not. Anybody approaching the airport naturally went toward the terminal signs. Victor saw that as a threat. We saw his diesel tank. Neither side needed an argument. We needed a trade. Their group had fuel and 2 mechanics who understood the dispensing equipment. We had more packaged food, medicine, and access to the restaurant water system, while municipal pressure remained. Victor wanted antibiotics. Priya refused to trade medication without knowing who needed it. The next afternoon, a woman from the cargo group arrived with Victor and a second man. Her name was Beth Carver. She had a deep cut along her forearm from sheet metal. The injury was 2 days old. Priya examined it inside a service vestibule, while Victor remained outside our main barrier. The wound needed cleaning and proper dressing. Priya did not see evidence that it had come from an infected person. Beth was alert, spoke normally, and had no fever. Priya treated her. She did not give her antibiotics automatically. Victor did not argue after Priya explained why. In return, the cargo group delivered 2 drums of diesel for our rooftop generator using a maintenance cart. The transfer took longer than I expected. Victor's fuel technician, Cole Finch, inspected the drums, pump, hoses, and grounding connection before allowing anybody to move fuel. When Marcus offered to help, Cole told him exactly where to stand and what not to touch. That was another useful limit. Marcus knew ground vehicles. Cole knew fuel handling. We stopped pretending those were the same job. The trade gave us several days of generator time at our reduced load. It did not solve fuel. Victor made that clear. The temporary tank had been intended for maintenance vehicles. It was not full. Their group needed it too. The airport fuel farm contained vastly more fuel, but most of it was aviation fuel stored behind controlled systems. Pumps, valves, keys, electrical power, grounding procedures, and compatible equipment stood between us and any of it. Saul said attempting to improvise there could disable equipment or start a fire. Nobody argued. By the end of our first week in the North Concourse, our position looked stronger. The checkpoint had layered barriers. The baggage route was marked. Unused jet bridges were locked. Interior doors had labels showing whether they depended on electricity. Food was inventoried. Water was stored. The generator load was reduced. We had observation positions and scheduled watches. It still was not a fortress in the way people used that word before the outbreak. If 100 infected crossed the apron and struck the same windows for hours, we had no guarantee the glass would hold. If fire started inside our sealed area, half our barricades could become obstacles to our own evacuation. If municipal water stopped, our stored supply would begin shrinking immediately. If the generator failed, several powered systems changed state. If somebody entered the baggage route behind us, the person could reach the center of our concourse without crossing the public checkpoint. So we kept working. Brett and Monique created a door chart. We tested one door at a time. Marcus and Kimber inspected the gate areas. Renee reduced the number of powered refrigerators again. Diane tracked daily water use and showed us that people were consuming more for washing than we thought. Priya changed the rules. Hands still had to be washed before food preparation and after handling waste or wounds. Nobody used drinking water to rinse floors. The distinction saved more than arguments. On the 9th day, the water pressure dropped for nearly an hour. The taps on the upper level stopped first. Restrooms near the checkpoint still had weak flow. Then the pressure returned. Monique said, "That is warning enough. Fill anything clean that remains empty." We spent the next 2 hours doing exactly that. On the 10th day, a man approached the terminal alone from the parking side. He wore an airport employee jacket and carried a backpack. We watched him from behind the checkpoint barrier. He stayed outside the outer glass doors and held up both hands. His name was Patrick Givens. He had worked for an airport hotel, not mine. He had been hiding in an office near the parking garage with 2 co-workers. The co-workers were gone. He would not explain immediately. Priya spoke to him from behind the locked door and asked whether he had been bitten, had blood in his eyes or mouth, or had any open wound contaminated by an infected person. Patrick showed us his arms and legs. He had scrapes from climbing a fence. Nothing obviously contaminated. We did not let him directly into the sleeping area. We had established an observation room near the outer edge of the concourse, using a gate office and adjoining restroom. The room had a separate entrance and could be watched through glass. Patrick stayed there. He ate. He slept. He remained alert and normal through the next day. Only then did we let him join us. That brought us to 12. It also showed Victor's concern was not imaginary. People were finding the terminal. On the 12th morning, Saul heard an aircraft, not on the runway, on the radio. He had been checking the emergency frequencies at scheduled intervals to save batteries. Most transmissions were fragments, people asking for help from places we could not reach, automated airport information from systems still running, occasional voices from aircraft passing high overhead. This transmission repeated. A flight crew was trying to contact anybody at our airport. Saul handed the radio to Kimber and told everybody else to stay quiet. The voice came through again. A woman identified herself as the captain of a regional passenger aircraft. She gave the airport name. Then her flight identification. She said they had departed a smaller city after their original airport became unusable. They had diverted twice. Their fuel reserves were low enough that they needed to land soon. She asked whether either main runway was physically clear. Saul answered carefully. He did not claim to be air traffic control. He identified himself as Airport Fire Service and told her the control tower was not operating as far as we knew. The captain asked whether we had direct observation of the runways. We had partial observation from the terminal roof. That was not enough. She needed information about vehicles, debris, and visible obstructions. Saul told her we would inspect from the ground if we decided we could support the landing. The captain did not demand anything. She gave us facts. There were 26 adults aboard, including 3 crew members. Several passengers had boarded after spending hours in a crowded evacuation shelter. Nobody on the aircraft was currently violent. One passenger had a fever. The crew had moved that passenger away from the others after he became confused. The captain said they could not establish the cause. That stopped everybody in the room. Priya asked Saul for the radio. She explained our screening concern and asked whether anybody aboard had a known bite, blood exposure, or contact with a symptomatic infected person. The answer took several minutes, because the flight attendant had to question passengers. When the captain returned, she said one man admitted he had helped restrain an infected person at the evacuation shelter before boarding. He had a cut on his hand at the time. That was the same passenger who now had fever and confusion. Priya did not need to name the disease. The exposure history was enough, she said. He cannot enter our occupied area. If the crew can keep him isolated, we can plan around him. If they cannot, the risk changes. The captain said the passenger was secured in the rear galley area behind a closed partition and 2 rows of empty seats. She did not claim that arrangement was safe forever. She said they had limited options in flight. We asked when she needed an answer. She gave us less than 2 hours. After that, they would have to choose between landing without ground information or diverting again with fuel she did not want to spend. Saul looked at me. I looked at Monique. Nobody gave a speech. We started counting. We had 12 people. The aircraft could add 25 people if the sick passenger never entered our camp. That would more than triple our population. Our food could absorb that for a while. Our water could not. Priya could screen people, but she could not guarantee that somebody exposed shortly before boarding would have symptoms yet. We had 1 observation room. We would need several. Opening an airfield route meant moving vehicles and inspecting a runway. The aircraft needed a safe place to stop. If we brought it to our concourse, we needed either a passenger bridge or stairs. Kimber could operate a bridge if its power remained stable. Marcus could position ground equipment. Neither could direct an aircraft from the cockpit. The flight crew would have to handle taxi decisions based on information Saul could provide. Renee had already opened Diane's water notebook. She said, "If all of them stay, our current drinking supply becomes a short-term reserve. We will be sending people outside for water within days." Monique added another problem. The cleanest quarantine space is at the far end of the concourse, but using it means opening 2 fire doors we currently keep shut. 1 power change can trap people on the wrong side. Brett said he could block the automatic closure on 1 door, only if we accepted that it would no longer function properly during a fire. Saul rejected that. We would use mechanical wedges only while moving people through, and remove them afterward. Patrick spoke last. He had spent almost a full day waiting behind glass before we accepted him. He said, "Make them wait too. Landing does not mean joining us immediately." That became the basis of the plan. We would not promise shelter to everyone before screening. We would give the aircraft a landing if we could clear 1 runway safely. We would use the farthest gate on our north concourse for unloading. The passengers would enter a sealed section containing 4 gate rooms, 2 restrooms, and an airline lounge. They would remain separated from our sleeping and food areas. The sick passenger would stay aboard if the crew could keep him contained. If that became impossible after landing, Priya and Saul would decide how to isolate him without exposing the rest of us. Then we called Victor. He refused before Saul finished explaining the plan. Victor said, "A running jet on that side brings noise across the east service road. We have infected around the maintenance shops already. You land 26 strangers, and you create movement we have to deal with too." Saul answered, "The aircraft is coming down somewhere. If we refuse information, the captain may still attempt this airport because the alternatives are worse." Victor said he would contact us again. He did. 10 minutes later, he offered a different plan. The aircraft could land and taxi to the cargo apron. His group would control the passengers and any supplies aboard. Saul asked what passenger stairs Victor had available. Victor had 1 mobile stair unit near a cargo stand. Marcus knew the unit. He said it was intended for larger doors and had not moved since before the outbreak. Kimber asked whether Victor had anyone qualified to position it against that aircraft. Victor did not answer directly. The captain ended the argument when Saul relayed both options. She knew the aircraft door height and ground clearance requirements. She said a normal passenger bridge at our concourse was preferable to unverified stairs positioned by people without training. Victor heard the transmission. His voice changed. He said, "Then the aircraft does not enter the cargo taxi lane. We will not open our gate for it." Saul replied, "We did not ask you to." That should have ended it. It did not. The runway inspection required us to use a service gate near the line between our area and Victor's. The gate had been damaged during the first evacuation. It opened, but one side dragged against the pavement. Beyond it, an access road crossed toward the runway. Victor's people had parked equipment near that road to reduce vehicle access to their side. We needed part of it moved. The aircraft called again. Fuel was now lower. The captain asked for a direct answer. Saul gave her one. We will inspect the north runway and the eastern turnoff. We can support unloading at the north concourse, if the route is clear. We cannot provide active air traffic control. The captain acknowledged. Then we moved. Marcus drove a baggage tractor with Brett beside him. I took the hotel shuttle. Saul sat in the passenger seat with a radio. Monique, Kimber and Patrick followed in a maintenance van. Priya stayed at the concourse with Renee and Diane. The runway looked empty from a distance. Up close, it was not. A catering truck sat partly across one taxiway. Several baggage containers had rolled from a staging area. A maintenance cart was stopped near the runway shoulder. There were loose objects that could damage an aircraft if blown or struck. Saul did not let us guess which areas were acceptable. He told the captain what we saw. She told him which runway she intended to use if conditions remained acceptable. Saul then had us inspect the section she needed. We drove the pavement slowly. Marcus and Brett moved the smaller debris. The catering truck still had keys in the ignition. It did not start. Its battery was dead. We did not waste time trying to repair it. Marcus used a tug and tow bar intended for ground equipment, not aircraft, to pull the truck far enough from the taxi route. The work was loud. The tug's diesel engine echoed between nearby maintenance buildings. Movement appeared at the windows of a ground operations building almost immediately. 2 infected came through a side door, then a third. They were more than 200 yards away. We had time. I positioned the shuttle across the access lane and kept its engine running. Marcus finished moving the catering truck. Brett climbed onto the tug. We left before the infected reached the pavement. They followed the vehicles for several hundred yards. 1 stopped. 2 continued. That told us enough. The aircraft landing would produce far more noise. We had to expect movement from every nearby structure that still contained infected. The runway itself remained clear. The taxi route to our concourse did not. When we reached the damaged service gate, Victor's pickup was parked across it. Victor stood beside the hood. Cole Finch and Beth Carver were with him. Victor had brought no rifle this time. That did not make the obstruction less deliberate. I stopped the shuttle. Saul lowered his window. Victor said, "If you bring that aircraft to the passenger terminal, you are pulling every mobile infected on this side toward both camps. Put it on the cargo apron, and we can separate them outside." Saul answered, "Your stairs are not verified for the aircraft," and the captain rejected the plan. "Move the truck." Victor looked at me instead. "You have 12 people. You are about to take 25 more. In 4 days you will be asking us for fuel and water we do not have." I said, "That part is true. Blocking the runway route does not create water." Victor remained beside the truck. Behind him, I could see one of the infected from the ground building approaching the service fence. It was still distant. I pointed. Victor looked back. Beth saw it too. Then another infected appeared farther along the road. Cole said something to Victor that I could not hear. Victor finally moved toward the driver's door. He did not leave because we convinced him. He left because standing in an exposed service gate while engine noise brought infected closer was a bad position for his own people. The pickup moved. We closed the damaged gate behind us. It did not latch correctly. Marcus used a chain through the frame to keep it from opening more than a few inches. The gate had become one more weak point we needed to watch during the landing. Back at the concourse, Kimber powered the passenger bridge at the far gate. It responded. She ran it through a short movement test, stopped, and checked the bridge cab. Then she shut it down until the aircraft arrived. Monique opened the quarantine section. We removed anything that could be used accidentally to block the fire doors. Renee placed sealed water and packaged food in the rooms. Diane made a list of every occupied space. Priya prepared masks, gloves, eye protection, and cleaning supplies. We were not protecting ourselves from airborne infection. We were protecting eyes, mouths, and open skin from saliva and fresh blood if somebody became violent at close range. The distinction changed how we worked. Nobody wore equipment that made it impossible to see or communicate. Saul remained on the radio. The captain gave her name as Rebecca Moore. Her first officer was Thomas Keane. The flight attendant was Julia Ames. Rebecca told us the sick passenger's condition had worsened. He had stopped answering questions normally. He still recognized simple instructions earlier in the flight. Now he was pulling at the restraint the crew had used to keep him in the rear section. Priya said, "Do not move him through the cabin after landing, unless remaining aboard becomes more dangerous. Keep the door between him and the other passengers closed if possible," Rebecca confirmed. A few minutes later, the aircraft appeared beyond the terminal. I had spent years driving under arriving traffic. I had watched thousands of landings. This one was different because there was no normal airport around it. No steady movement on the taxiways. No line of baggage vehicles. No ramp crews waiting at the gates. No tower voice coordinating ground traffic that we could hear. The regional jet approached an empty runway, while 12 people watched from a terminal that had been partly abandoned for nearly 2 weeks. We did not cheer. We watched the pavement. The aircraft touched down and stayed straight. For several seconds, nothing else moved. Then the engine noise reached the terminal buildings. Infected began appearing. 2 came from the same ground operations building we had disturbed earlier. One emerged from beneath a covered loading area. Another came out through an open vehicle bay near a maintenance garage. There were not hundreds. There did not need to be. Every one of them was fast enough to interfere with people working outside. Rebecca slowed the aircraft and turned onto the taxiway Saul had inspected. Saul gave her position reports using the airport diagram and direct observation. He did not command the aircraft. Rebecca made every aircraft decision. Marcus and I drove ahead on the service road, not the taxiway, keeping our vehicles visible near the turn toward the north concourse. We had put portable work lights beside the safe ground equipment lane and aimed them away from the cockpit. Kimber had warned us not to create glare. The portable lights were not runway lights. They marked our access area and the location where ground personnel would be waiting. The first infected reached the damaged service gate while the aircraft was still taxiing. The chain held. A second infected struck the gate beside the first. Then 2 more arrived. The frame moved. Marcus stopped the baggage tractor and looked toward me. I told him to keep going. If we stopped the aircraft unloading plan because 4 infected were behind a chained gate, we had no plan at all. We reached the gate stand. Kimber entered the bridge cab. Rebecca brought the aircraft to a stop using the stand markings she could see. Thomas handled the shutdown with her. Nobody outside touched the aircraft until Rebecca confirmed it was safe. The engines wound down. The sudden reduction in noise did not stop the infected already moving toward us. Marcus positioned baggage carts across the service lane below the gate. Patrick and Brett closed the nearest ground-level door. I drove the shuttle across the lane leading from the damaged gate. The first infected had already forced the gate open another foot. Then Victor's pickup appeared from the cargo side. For 1 second I thought he had come to stop us again. Cole was driving. Victor sat beside him. Behind them came a maintenance loader. Victor used the radio. "We have movement on the east service road. More are coming out of the vehicle shop. Your gate will not hold," Saul answered. "Then help us close it after the aircraft is unloaded." Victor did not reply. The maintenance loader continued toward the gate. Cole turned the bucket sideways and pushed a concrete equipment barrier across part of the opening. That narrowed it. The infected on the other side struck the barrier and fencing. For the first time since meeting Victor, both groups were working on the same problem without discussing who controlled what. Kimber brought the bridge toward the aircraft. She moved slowly. Rebecca watched from the cockpit and communicated through Saul. The bridge reached the aircraft door. Julia opened it from inside after confirming the position. The first person through was Thomas Keane. He carried an aircraft medical kit and nothing else. Priya met him at the controlled gate room entrance. Thomas said, "The sick passenger is restrained in the rear. He is no longer speaking coherently, and we have kept everyone else forward." Priya asked about direct exposures during the flight. Thomas said nobody had been bitten. The flight attendant had avoided close contact after the passenger became aggressive. 2 passengers had helped move seats and baggage to create distance but had not touched him. That was useful. It was not certainty. We started unloading. Passengers came through one at a time. Priya asked the same exposure questions. Name, recent bite, open wound exposed to saliva or blood, blood in eyes or mouth, contact with the sick passenger, current fever, confusion, difficulty speaking. Nobody liked the process. Nobody refused. The first 5 moved into the airline lounge. The next group went to 2 gate rooms. Diane recorded names and assigned spaces. Renee handed out water but stopped people from taking extra bottles. Then the damaged service gate failed. The chain did not break. The gatepost shifted in damaged concrete. The entire panel moved inward enough for one infected to squeeze around the equipment barrier. Cole backed the loader toward it. The infected climbed onto the lower frame. Another came through behind him. Marcus shouted from the service lane. Patrick pulled the ground-level terminal door shut. I ran for the shuttle. The vehicle still blocked part of the lane, but there was enough space beside it for a person to pass. I moved the shuttle closer to the wall until the passenger side nearly touched a baggage cart. That closed the gap. The first infected reached Cole's loader. Cole kept the cab closed. The infected struck the side window. Victor was outside near the concrete barrier. He backed away and raised a long maintenance bar. The second infected came around the loader. Marcus hit it with the baggage tractor. Not fast. The front frame caught the infected at the legs and pushed the person to the pavement. Marcus stopped immediately so he would not drive into Victor. Victor used the maintenance bar to keep the infected from getting back up. Brett reached the service door and pulled Marcus inside. Cole reversed the loader and wedged its bucket against the damaged gate. The opening closed enough that the next infected could not get through. The loader was now trapped outside our barrier. Cole remained in the cab. Victor was still outside too. Saul shouted over the radio, "Use the cargo lane and get back to your side. Do not try to cross the gate." Victor looked toward the terminal door, then at the infected gathering behind the damaged fence. He did not argue. He climbed onto the loader step. Cole drove away with Victor holding the exterior rail. They disappeared toward the cargo service road. The gate stayed partly blocked by the concrete barrier, but the loader had been the only thing keeping the loose panel from moving. We had lost that outer line. Saul ordered everybody off the ground level. Marcus came through the service door. Patrick closed it. Monique dropped the interior shutter. We had planned the gate as an escape and equipment route during unloading. Now it was sealed. The passengers continued entering through the jet bridge above. Then Julia called from the aircraft. The sick man had broken one restraint. Rebecca and Thomas were already off the plane. Julia was still aboard with the remaining passengers. Priya told her to bring everyone forward and leave the sick passenger behind the closed rear partition. 6 passengers came through quickly. The final 2 were helping an older man who had difficulty walking because of a knee injury unrelated to the outbreak. They reached the bridge. Julia followed. She closed the aircraft door from outside, only after Rebecca confirmed the procedure. The sick passenger remained aboard. 25 people had entered the quarantine section. The 26th was inside the aircraft. Then we heard impacts from the service shutter below. The infected had reached the terminal wall. Brett checked the camera feed. 3 were inside the area beyond the damaged gate. More remained outside. They moved toward sound and visible movement. Our shuttle and baggage tractor blocked their easiest route to the service door, but one had climbed onto a baggage cart. The shutter itself was stronger than the damaged outer gate. We could leave them outside. Then the fire alarm activated again. The sound started in another section of the airport. A second later, emergency strobes flashed inside our quarantine wing. Monique swore once and ran for the corridor. Several fire doors released. One closed between the lounge and the gate rooms holding the new passengers. Another unlocked the employee stairwell near our service shutter. Brett yelled that the power state had changed. The passenger bridge stopped responding. Emergency lighting replaced the normal gate lights. Priya ordered everybody in quarantine to stay inside the rooms they already occupied. Most did. One man stepped into the corridor because his wife was in the next room. Diane stopped him before he crossed the fire door. She said, "If you start moving between groups, we lose the separation we built. She stays where she is, and you stay here until Priya clears it." The man went back. There was no long argument. The building was already giving us enough trouble. Brett traced the alarm to a power fault affecting multiple terminal systems. The generator was still running. The utility feed from outside had changed. That caused part of the building to transfer loads. The passenger bridge remained frozen against the aircraft. Kimber could not retract it until power returned to its control circuit. That meant the aircraft was physically connected to our terminal with an enclosed walkway, and the infected passenger was inside the aircraft. Rebecca looked at Kimber. Kimber said, "The terminal door at our end of the bridge has a mechanical latch. We close and lock that now. The bridge can stay attached." We did exactly that. The aircraft became an isolated compartment. Nobody needed to enter it. The sick man could not operate the aircraft door correctly in his condition, even if he reached the front cabin. But we did not rely on that. We locked the terminal side bridge door. Rebecca kept the cockpit and cabin keys with her. Then the shouting started below, not from infected. Victor's voice came through the radio. Cole had reached the cargo building. Victor had not. He had jumped from the loader when an infected blocked their route and had gone behind a maintenance shed. Cole could see him from the cargo fence, but could not reach him without reopening another gate. Victor was asking for a route through our baggage service area. Monique checked our marked baggage map. There was a branch from the shed area toward the same baggage tunnel we had sealed during our first clearing operation. The branch had an infected woman trapped behind a fire door. We knew exactly where she was. Opening that route could bring Victor inside. It could also release her, Monique said. We can open from our side, pull Victor through, and close it again. Nobody touches the powered door controls. We use the manual service door beside it. Marcus and I went with her. Saul stayed because his injured hand was getting worse after hours of radio work and movement. Priya told him to sit down before she had to make him. The baggage tunnel emergency lights were weaker than before. We followed our white tape arrows. At the branch, we heard the infected woman hitting the old fire door. She was still active after more than a week inside that section. She had access to a staff break room on her side. There could have been water there. There could have been food. We did not know. The manual service door sat 30 feet away from her barrier. Monique unlocked it. Victor was outside. He entered immediately. Behind him, 2 infected came around the maintenance shed. Marcus and I pulled the manual door shut. Monique turned the mechanical lock. 1 infected struck the outside less than a second later. Victor leaned against the wall. He had a torn sleeve. Priya's first question was already obvious to all of us. Victor said, "Fence wire. No bite. Nobody touched me." Monique did not accept that as enough. We took him to a separate office instead of the cargo route. Priya examined him. The tear on his sleeve covered a shallow scrape. There was no saliva or fresh blood on the clothing that Priya could see. Victor remained in observation anyway. He did not protest. The aircraft passengers remained separated through the night. The airport around us became quieter again. Without the jet engines and ground equipment, infected movement on the apron slowed. Some stayed near the damaged service gate. Others wandered toward structures where they could still see flashing emergency lights. We shut off the lights we controlled. The fire alarm eventually stopped. The normal utility feed did not return. Our generator took more of the load. Brett went to the roof after sunrise and came back with the fuel reading. We had burned more diesel during the landing operation than planned. Passenger bridge power, additional lights, opened sections, and changed utility conditions had increased demand. He could reduce it again. He could not recover what was already gone. Renee gave him the new population count. 37 people in our controlled concourse. 25 of them had arrived on the aircraft. Victor remained in temporary observation and still belonged to the cargo group. The sick passenger remained aboard. Rebecca asked what we intended to do about him. Nobody answered immediately. Priya had listened to reports from other survivors during the first days. We had all seen the pattern ourselves. Exposure did not cause immediate change. People developed fever, then confusion. Speech deteriorated. Impulse control disappeared. Violent fixation followed. The process varied. Some people changed within several hours of known exposure. Others took most of a day. We still did not know enough to use a precise window. The passenger aboard the aircraft matched the pattern too closely. Leaving him restrained inside a sealed aircraft was safer for us. It was not safe forever for the aircraft. If he damaged equipment or started a fire, the connected bridge could expose the terminal. Rebecca and Julia discussed the cabin layout with Saul and Priya. The decision stayed with the people who understood the aircraft. Rebecca said they could disconnect the bridge and leave the airplane isolated once bridge power returned. Nobody needed to board. Kimber and Rebecca would coordinate the bridge movement from outside. Several hours later, Brett restored the bridge circuit, using only the building controls he understood. Kimber checked the bridge. Rebecca watched through the terminal window. The sick passenger was no longer visible from our side. Julia had closed the interior cabin partition before leaving. Kimber disengaged the bridge and retracted it. The aircraft door remained closed. The regional jet sat alone on the stand. The man inside was isolated. We never opened that aircraft again during the next week. The rescued passengers brought useful skills. They also brought problems immediately. Gavin Reed had worked commercial plumbing installation for 13 years. He could inspect fixtures and explain why some of our improvised water ideas were poor. Susan Bellamy managed a warehouse and took over part of the supply inventory from Diane. Harold Pierce repaired restaurant equipment. Nadia Fleming worked in hospital administration. She was not clinical staff, but she understood sanitation schedules, supply tracking, and how quickly shared spaces became disorganized. 3 passengers had no technical background that helped the terminal directly. We still assigned work: observation, cleaning, food distribution, moving stored water, sorting blankets, checking batteries. Nobody needed a special profession to carry a container or watch a door. Rebecca, Thomas, and Julia remained responsible for information about the aircraft. They did not become general aviation authorities. Rebecca knew flight operations. Thomas knew the aircraft. Julia knew cabin equipment and passenger procedures. The control tower remained dark. No one pretended otherwise. The largest problem came from water. Renee recalculated our stored drinking supply with 37 people. The number changed the room. We could cut washing again. We could cook foods that used less water. We could reduce waste. We could not reduce drinking below what people needed without creating another medical problem. On the morning after the landing, municipal pressure dropped again. This time it did not recover. The faucets at the gate restrooms produced weak flow for several minutes, then air. The restaurant sinks stopped next. Gavin checked the accessible valves and confirmed they were open. Brett checked the local booster pump. It had power. The building was asking for water that was no longer arriving at sufficient pressure. Monique shut several branches to prevent leaks and contamination from sections we were not using. Gavin agreed with her. Our stored water became the only dependable potable supply we had. The airport had water elsewhere. That did not mean we could drink it. Fire suppression storage was not treated as drinking water. Vehicle tanks were not drinking water containers. Unknown tanks remained unknown. Aircraft lavatory equipment was useless for our purpose. A parked potable water service truck could help only if its tank was clean and still contained safe water. Marcus remembered 2 airline potable water trucks that normally worked the international gates. One was visible from the roof. It sat near another concourse. The other had disappeared during the evacuation. Reaching the visible truck required crossing open apron and passing 2 buildings where we had already seen infected. We added it to the list. We did not immediately send people after it. The damaged service gate came first. Our outer barrier on that side was gone. Infected still moved through the fenced lane whenever they heard activity. The interior service shutter held. The hotel shuttle remained parked behind it. That meant one of our safest vehicle exits was unavailable. We still had the baggage route. We could reach another staff exit near the old hotel lane, but that route was slower and narrower. Monique looked at our door chart and said, "We have spent almost 2 weeks closing entrances. The landing forced us to reopen 3. Now we close 2 permanently and keep one route we can support." Nobody disagreed. We abandoned the damaged service gate as an access point. Brett and Marcus used baggage carts, shelving, and the shuttle itself to build a deeper obstruction behind the shutter. We did not try to repair the exterior fence under pressure from infected. We accepted the loss. That section of our outer defense was gone. The terminal wall and interior shutter became the new boundary. It reduced our vehicle access. It also reduced the number of things 11 original survivors and 25 new arrivals had to watch. Victor returned to his cargo group after 24 hours without symptoms. Before leaving, he sat with Saul, Monique, and me in the service vestibule. He did not apologize for blocking the gate. I did not ask him to. He said, "The landing brought 6 infected across our east yard. We stopped 4 outside. 2 got into the vehicle shop before we shut it. That building is gone to us now," Saul said. "We lost our main service gate." Victor nodded. Both camps had paid for the aircraft. Victor's next words were practical. "We still have diesel. You still have food. Neither of us has enough water for a growing population." That was the first time he described the problem as shared. The cargo warehouse had 1 functioning sink before pressure failed. Now it had none. Their bottled supply was smaller than ours. Beth had found several cases of drinks in an airline catering pallet, but not enough to change the situation for long. We agreed to exchange information before supplies. Every morning and evening, one camp would radio the other with water, fuel, infection movement, and route conditions. No surprise visits. No assumption that a closed gate would be opened. No person crossed between camps without observation after a possible exposure. It was not one community. It was cooperation between two camps occupying different pieces of the same airport. That description remained accurate. The passengers from the regional jet spent 2 full days in our quarantine section. Priya checked everyone twice a day. One woman developed a headache. Another had stomach problems. Neither had fever or confusion. A man with a cut on his forearm became the focus of attention because people remembered the infected passenger on the aircraft. Priya examined the wound. He had cut himself on luggage hardware after the plane landed. The wound occurred after the sick passenger had already been isolated. There was no known contaminated blood or saliva involved. Priya cleaned it and made everyone stop treating every scratch as proof of infection. Fear could waste resources too. By the 3rd morning after the landing, no additional passenger had developed the pattern we recognized. Priya still would not promise that every risk had passed. She allowed the groups to begin controlled work together. That decision created another problem. 37 people could not live under rules designed by 12 without discussion. The first dispute was about food. One of the rescued passengers took 2 protein bars from a storage shelf after Renee had distributed breakfast. He did not hide them. He said he was hungry and had not understood the shelf was controlled. Renee took the bars back. Then she changed the room. Food storage moved behind a locked restaurant door. Distribution times went on the wall. Anybody working outside the concourse received an extra ration when the work required it. Anybody with a medical reason for different food spoke to Priya. Nobody helped himself from storage. The passenger accepted it. There was no punishment. The system had been unclear. Renee fixed the system. The second dispute was about watches. Several new arrivals expected the original group to keep guarding because we knew the airport. Monique ended that within 1 day. She took 6 new people through the safe routes and showed each person one observation position. She did not give them master keys. She did not show them every service entrance. She taught enough for them to perform a specific job. That became our method. Knowledge spread through tasks. Access remained limited by need. On the 17th day since the outbreak reached the airport, we made our first water run outside the concourse. The potable water truck remained where Marcus had seen it. Rebecca confirmed the vehicle was used to service aircraft drinking water systems. That still did not prove the water inside remained safe. Gavin wanted to inspect the tank, hoses, seals, and service records if we could reach it. Marcus knew how to drive the truck if the keys were present. I knew the apron route. We took 5 people. No more. The cargo group warned us about infected near the ground operations building. Victor also reported that the east vehicle shop still contained at least 2. We avoided both areas. The potable water truck sat beside a parked wide-body aircraft at another concourse. We approached in the hotel shuttle first. The truck's cab was locked. Marcus found the key in a secured dispatch box inside a nearby service room after Rebecca told us where airline ground teams often stored keys. The truck started. Its fuel gauge showed enough for a short move. Gavin inspected the water fittings. The tank was partly full. The service seal was intact. A maintenance tag showed it had been sanitized shortly before the airport evacuation. That was encouraging. It was still old standing water in a warm vehicle. We did not drink from it on the apron. We drove the truck back to a controlled service point and let Gavin and Priya decide how to handle the contents. They treated it as questionable until they could inspect odor, clarity, tank condition, and use an appropriate disinfection process for potable water. Even after that, Priya wanted our sealed bottled supply reserved for drinking whenever possible. The truck water went first to cooking and other uses where heating was part of the process. It extended our margin. It did not make water unlimited. The same trip showed us another change. The infected we saw outside were slower than many from the first week. One man crossed the apron toward our moving shuttle and stopped twice. Another remained seated beside a baggage cart until the vehicle noise drew him up. They were living bodies. Days without regular water, food, sleep, or treatment were affecting them. Fresh cases remained different. We remembered the man aboard the aircraft. Sealed spaces could preserve active infected longer because some still had access to drinks or food. The airport remained dangerous in uneven pockets. An empty open apron could be safer than a locked office. A quiet aircraft could be worse than both. That changed how we searched. We stopped assuming enclosed meant protected. We also stopped opening enclosed spaces without a reason. The regional jet at our gate stayed closed. On the 18th day, there had been no movement visible through its windows for many hours. Rebecca did not want anyone boarding. Neither did Priya. There was nothing aboard worth taking that justified exposure. The remaining passenger snacks and bottled water were not enough to change our supply problem. The aircraft itself required fuel, inspection, ground support, and a clear operational environment before it could ever fly again. We had none of those in reliable form, so the plane remained where it had stopped. People occasionally looked at it and talked about leaving. Rebecca stopped those conversations with facts. She said, "A parked aircraft is not an escape plan. We do not have dispatch support, reliable fuel access, verified runway services, maintenance inspection, or a destination confirmed safe enough to accept us." Nobody asked her to fly after that. The airport fire station became more useful over the next 2 days. Saul could not perform heavy work with his hand, but his swelling finally began to decrease. Priya allowed him more movement and continued watching the wound. He trained Marcus and Patrick to inspect the emergency vehicles without starting equipment unnecessarily. One fire engine had a full tank of diesel. We did not drain it for the generator. Saul refused. He wanted at least one firefighting vehicle available if we ever needed it, and none of us knew enough to assume the building sprinkler systems would keep working. That decision cost us potential generator fuel. It also meant we still had a response vehicle if a fire started. Cole supported him. The cargo group had enough maintenance diesel to continue limited generator support for both camps, but not if people drove equipment for convenience. Vehicle use changed. Walking inside the controlled concourse was normal. Ground vehicles moved only for a defined job. Engines shut off when they were not needed. No one idled a shuttle for air conditioning. Nobody drove to the cargo building for a conversation that could happen on radio. We had spent the first days thinking about infected. By the third week, infrastructure consumed more of our time. A sink leak could waste water. A freezer failure could destroy food. A door left on the wrong power state could open a route. A blocked fire exit could trap us. A dead radio battery could isolate a work team. The infected were still dangerous. They were no longer the only thing deciding whether our concourse remained occupied. On the 19th evening, the rooftop generator shut down. The terminal went dark in sections. Emergency lights appeared a few seconds later. Brett reached the roof with Marcus. I stayed below with Monique because power loss changed our doors. We checked every barrier on the list. The checkpoint remained blocked. The employee corridor door had released, but the vending machine and tractor still held it. The passenger bridges remained locked at the terminal side. The service shutter stayed down. One interior fire door closed across our food route. We opened the manual pedestrian door beside it and kept the larger fire door functional. Brett radioed from the roof. The generator had stopped on a fault. He would not reset it until he knew why. That meant several hours without powered refrigeration. Renee kept the cooler doors closed. Nobody opened them to check food repeatedly. Brett found low coolant in the generator system. He also found evidence of a slow leak at a hose connection. He could tighten the connection. He could not manufacture replacement coolant. The maintenance records from the fire station listed the correct specification. Victor's cargo building had compatible maintenance stock. Cole delivered it at first light. The generator returned to service after Brett checked the system again. The outage lasted long enough to teach the new arrivals our old lesson. Electricity was not one switch. Emergency power did not mean every system worked. Every restored load consumed fuel. Every powered door needed to be understood in both states. The next morning, Diane posted the updated water inventory. Nobody spoke for several seconds after reading it. Even with the potable water truck, we had less than a week at our current use, if no new source appeared. That estimate assumed careful rationing. It assumed no major medical need. It assumed no contamination. It assumed the cargo group did not require emergency support from our supply. It assumed nobody else arrived. The airport hotels became our next target. That was the first problem in 3 weeks where my old job gave me more useful knowledge than the airport workers. I knew the hotel shuttle loop. I knew which hotels had loading docks. I knew which properties kept bottled water for conference rooms. I knew which road dipped beneath an overpass and would probably be blocked if abandoned cars had piled there. I knew a back service entrance to my own hotel because I had used it every day. I did not know who was inside. I did not know whether the building still had water. I did not know whether the road remained clear. The fortress we had built could not produce what we needed. That made the next decision simple. We would have to leave it to keep it functioning. Before that run, we changed the concourse organization again. The rescued passengers no longer stayed in quarantine rooms. Priya cleared them into the general population after continued observation and no further infection symptoms. The far gate section became our permanent intake zone for any future arrival. Rebecca and Thomas inspected the bridge controls with Kimber, but did not reopen the aircraft. Julia joined Renee's food team. Gavin took responsibility for water fittings and container condition. Susan worked with Diane on inventory. Harold began keeping the restaurant equipment we still used operating, without drawing unnecessary power. 4 passengers rotated through watch positions. 3 handled sanitation. 2 joined Marcus for ground equipment work after he trained them on specific vehicles. Nobody became an expert in 3 days. People became useful at one task and then learned another. Victor's cargo group stayed separate. They repaired their own fencing and sealed the vehicle shop containing infected. We traded food for another measured delivery of diesel. Cole supervised every transfer. Beth's arm continued healing. Saul's hand finally allowed him a partial grip, though Priya still stopped him from lifting heavy equipment. Patrick took over more radio checks. Renee complained that he talked too much on the air. He shortened his transmissions. That was how most problems were solved by then. Not with speeches, with corrections. The hotel run was delayed one day because Monique found a problem with the baggage route we intended to use for vehicle access. A fire door near the loading exit had started closing more slowly than before. Brett inspected the track and found luggage straps wrapped around one lower guide. The straps had probably been pulled there when the baggage system stopped during the evacuation. He removed them with the circuit isolated. The door worked again. We tested it twice. Then we left it alone. That delay annoyed me because our water estimate had not improved. It also prevented us from depending on a door that might have jammed while we were outside. The next morning, I checked the shuttle before sunrise. Fuel sat above a quarter tank. The tires held pressure. The oil level had not changed. The cooling system was normal. I removed anything from the passenger area that could become loose during a hard stop. Gavin loaded empty food-grade containers and 2 clean restaurant stockpots with lids. Marcus brought tools for doors, tires, and basic vehicle problems. Patrick carried a portable radio and spare batteries. Priya gave us a medical bag with dressings, antiseptic, pain medicine, gloves, and eye protection. She stayed at the terminal. We needed her there more than we needed her on a supply run. Monique gave me keys for airport service access, but reminded me they would not help at the hotel. My old hotel keyring was still in my pocket. It had been there since the first day. Renee handed us food for one day. No extra case. No box hidden under a seat for comfort. We carried what the trip required. Victor called before we opened the route. His group had checked the western service road from the roof. He had seen 2 infected near the employee parking entrance and no moving vehicles. He said the cargo group could not spare people for our run. He could spare 1 drum of diesel later if we returned with enough potable water to stabilize both camps. I told him we would not promise water we had not found. He accepted that. Rebecca asked whether we intended to search hotel rooms. I said no. The first objective was the loading area, kitchen storage, conference supply rooms, and building water system if accessible. Guest floors created too many closed doors. We would not open them without a reason. Monique approved. The north concourse doors closed behind us. Marcus raised the baggage route service shutter. I drove through. The shutter dropped again once the shuttle cleared. For the first time since the landing, I was outside our controlled section with a vehicle route open ahead. The road toward the hotel loop looked empty for the first 100 yards. I stayed below 30 miles an hour. Speed was useful only while I had room to stop. Abandoned luggage carts could roll into the lane. A body could be hidden behind a van. A stalled vehicle could block both directions around the next curve. Patrick watched the passenger side. Marcus sat behind me with a long-handled tool across his knees. Gavin watched the rear windows. We passed the employee parking entrance Victor had mentioned. 1 infected stood near a payment booth. The other was gone. The standing man noticed the shuttle when we crossed the open lane. He ran toward us. I kept moving. He was still more than 50 yards behind when we turned onto the hotel road. The overpass ahead was partly blocked. 3 cars sat nose to tail in the left lane. A delivery van occupied the right shoulder. There was enough room between them for the shuttle if I folded the passenger mirror. I stopped before the narrow section. Marcus got out and checked beneath the vehicles. No movement. He folded the mirror and guided me through. The side of the shuttle missed the delivery van by inches. I cleared it without contact. Marcus climbed back in. The hotel came into view. It was 6 stories, built for business travelers and airline crews. I had driven to that loading entrance hundreds of times. The front lobby doors were broken. The service side looked better. 2 delivery bays were closed. A kitchen door stood open by about a foot. That door bothered me more than the broken lobby doors. People had expected trouble at the front. An open kitchen door meant something had happened in a work area where staff normally kept doors shut. I parked the shuttle facing outward. We waited. Nothing appeared. Patrick stayed with the vehicle. Marcus, Gavin and I approached the kitchen entrance. I knew the door should have latched automatically. A plastic delivery crate was wedged against the bottom. There was dried blood on the inside face. We did not enter there. I took us to the staff door farther down the loading dock. My key worked. The corridor inside was dark. The smell was bad, but not enough to identify one cause. Spoiled food was part of it. Trash was another. We heard no movement. I knew the kitchen offices were to the left and conference storage to the right. The water shut-off room sat beyond the laundry area. We went right. A beverage storage room still had 6 sealed cases of bottled water. Marcus carried them directly to the shuttle. That was less than I had hoped for. It was still useful. The conference storage room held more. Cases of sparkling water, small juice bottles, shelf-stable drink mixers that were useless for hydration without water, coffee supplies, disposable cups. We took the water and juice. We left the rest. Gavin wanted the building water system. The taps in a service sink were dry. He followed the piping toward the mechanical room. The domestic water booster equipment had no power. A pressure gauge sat near 0. That meant the hotel was not receiving useful municipal pressure either. The hot water storage tanks still contained water. Gavin checked the system, valves, and maintenance labels. The tanks were large enough to matter. We had containers. We also had a problem. Getting water from the tanks to the shuttle required time in a building we had not cleared. Gavin found a drain connection that could feed into clean containers without dismantling anything. Before we started, I heard a door close, somewhere beyond the laundry room. Not slam. Close. Marcus heard it too. We stopped moving. Then a man spoke from the other side of the laundry doors. He said, "If you are alive, say something before you come through." I answered from where I stood. "My name is Grant. I drove the hotel shuttle. We are here for water. There are 4 of us." The man told us to stay where we were. We did. A minute later, he appeared behind the wired glass in the laundry door. He was thin, unshaven, and holding a kitchen knife low beside his leg. He recognized me first. His name was Russell Fry. He had worked nights at the hotel front desk. 2 other adults were with him. One was a housekeeper named Camille Brooks. The other was a guest named Eric Vance. They had sealed themselves in the staff laundry and adjacent office after the lobby was overrun. They had been living on vending food, bottled drinks, and whatever remained in the kitchen storage they could reach safely. They had heard our shuttle before, but thought it might belong to people using the road. Russell asked where we were staying. I told him the North Concourse. He knew enough about the airport to understand the distance. Then he asked whether we had water. I told him we had some and needed more. That answer disappointed him. He had hoped we had a working system. We had hoped the same about the hotel. Camille opened the laundry door after we agreed to keep distance until Priya could screen them later. None of the 3 showed fever or confusion. None reported a bite or known blood exposure. Russell had a healing cut on his scalp from the first night. He said it came from falling glass in the lobby before any infected reached him. We could not verify that there. We treated all 3 as new arrivals. They could still help with the water. Camille knew which laundry carts were clean. Russell knew the maintenance key cabinet. Eric had worked residential construction before traveling for a sales job, which gave Gavin another person who could handle hoses and containers without inventing a new plumbing system. We drained only 1 hot water tank. Gavin did not want to empty every tank without knowing whether sediments or maintenance condition differed. The first tank produced clear water with no unusual odor. We still planned to treat it before drinking. We filled our clean containers. The work took almost an hour. During that time, something began moving in the kitchen. We heard metal trays fall, then repeated impacts against a swinging door. Russell said the kitchen had been closed off since the second day. He believed at least 2 infected were inside. That meant our open staff route was still separate. We did not investigate. The kitchen door from the loading dock remained wedged open, but the interior fire door between kitchen and laundry had held. We left it that way. The shuttle carried more weight on the return trip. Water containers were secured low in the passenger area. Russell, Camille and Eric sat apart from us near the rear. Patrick kept his seat near the front. We had gained 3 people, and enough questionable water to extend our supply by several days after treatment. The road back was not the same. The infected man from the employee parking entrance had reached the hotel road. He stood near the blocked overpass. Another infected was beside him. I could not use the same narrow lane safely with both of them close. Marcus suggested the hotel delivery road. I knew it rejoined the airport loop near a rental car facility. I also knew the road had a tight turn that larger shuttles usually avoided. Our bus could make it if the lane was clear. We turned around. The delivery road passed behind a retaining wall and 2 dumpsters. A compact car sat sideways near the tight turn. There was no room to pass. Marcus checked it. The keys were gone. The transmission would not shift without power. We did not have towing equipment. I backed the shuttle almost 200 yards to a driveway wide enough to turn around. That cost time and fuel. We returned toward the blocked overpass. The 2 infected were still there. Patrick said, "If you stop short, they will come to the bus. We can draw them away from the opening and circle back." That matched what I had done at the fire station. I approached slowly, stopped well before the gap, and sounded the horn twice. Both infected ran toward us. I reversed. They followed. Once they were clear of the narrow lane, I accelerated forward, turned into the hotel entrance, looped around the front drive, and came back from the opposite side. The infected followed the noise toward the entrance. I reached the overpass before they returned. Marcus folded the mirror again. We squeezed through. 1 water container shifted against its strap, but stayed upright. Nobody spilled anything. By the time the infected reached the far side of the blocked cars, we were already on the airport road. The return to the concourse took another 20 minutes because we used the baggage service entrance rather than the damaged gate. Monique opened the outer door only after Patrick identified us by radio and described the 3 new people. Russell, Camille, and Eric went directly to observation rooms. Priya screened them. The water went to Gavin. He and Priya treated the hotel tank water as non-potable until they finished their checks and disinfection process. The sealed bottled water went straight into the drinking inventory. Victor received his radio update before he asked. We had enough to share some treated hotel water with cargo once Gavin cleared it for non-critical use. Victor sent the promised diesel drum the same afternoon. That exchange bought both camps time. It did not solve the underlying problem. The city water remained down. We started mapping every plausible water source within a short vehicle radius. Hotel tanks, catering facilities, potable water trucks, sealed beverage stock. The fire station had water in vehicle tanks that Saul reserved for firefighting. We kept those categories separate. A large amount of liquid did not mean a large amount of drinking water. On the 21st evening, I walked the interior route from our sleeping area to the old checkpoint. The terminal looked different from the place we had entered. Half the lights were off. Advertising screens were dark. Restaurants were closed behind improvised storage locks. Baggage carts formed barriers where passengers once lined up. White tape arrows marked the routes we trusted. Black tape marked doors we did not open. Water containers occupied an entire gate office. A handwritten board listed food, generator fuel, potable water, watch assignments, medical restrictions, and outside work planned for morning. Russell, Camille, and Eric were still in observation. The rescued aircraft passengers had regular jobs now. Victor's cargo group remained separate and still controlled its own buildings. The control tower remained dark. The fuel farm remained outside our usable system. The damaged service gate remained abandoned. The regional aircraft still sat at the far gate with its bridge retracted. Beyond the glass, most of the airport remained uncontrolled. We could see runways, hangars, parked aircraft, roads, and terminals, extending far beyond anything our group could secure. Our barriers did not protect those areas. Our rules did not apply there. A few infected crossed the apron during daylight. At night, we avoided giving them visible movement to follow. The concourse was defensible because we had reduced it to a piece of airport we could understand. One checkpoint, one controlled baggage route, one intake section, one generator we could maintain for now, one primary sleeping area away from the glass, one working food storage system, one set of people assigned to every door that could change state. It was not secure because the walls were strong. It was secure because we had stopped opening things we could not support. The landing had cost us our outer service gate. The new passengers had cut our water margin sharply. The cargo group had lost a vehicle shop. The generator had already shown us one fault. Saul still could not use his injured hand normally. We were carrying more people with the same finite fuel, medicine, and infrastructure. That was the condition of the place after 3 weeks. We had not secured the airport. We had not cleared every terminal. We had not found an unlimited fuel supply. We had not restored municipal water. We had not turned 37 people into an army. We controlled one functioning piece of the airport and knew where most of its weak points were. That was enough to sleep behind several barriers instead of one. It was enough to receive an aircraft without losing the concourse. It was enough to keep food cold, ration water, isolate new arrivals, and move through the baggage system without guessing at every turn. It was enough to make Victor call us before moving equipment near our side. It was enough to make people arriving from the aircraft take watch shifts instead of waiting to be rescued again. The next morning, Diane changed the water estimate on the board after Gavin cleared part of the hotel supply for use. The number improved, not by much. We had time for another run. We did not have time to stop looking. I stood beside the old hotel shuttle with Marcus while he checked the rear door latch. The bus had started this whole move when I drove it through a baggage doorway with infected hitting the windows. Now it carried empty containers, tools, and a route list for another water search. Monique checked the service shutter behind us. Saul sat near the radio table with his hand rewrapped. Priya was examining Russell's old scalp cut in the intake room. Renee was arguing with Harold about whether one more refrigerator could be shut down. Rebecca and Kimber were checking the far gate without approaching the aircraft. Victor called to report 2 infected moving near the western maintenance lane, and no new activity at the cargo fence. Nobody had a complete picture. Nobody needed one. We had the information required for the next job. Marcus opened the service door. I started the shuttle. The generator continued running above us. The concourse lights we had chosen to keep came on in a narrow line behind the glass. Everything else stayed dark. We had built a fortress in the only sense that remained useful. We could defend one piece of the terminal, keep it operating at a reduced level, and close it when we left. The price was constant work. Water was already deciding what we did next. I put the shuttle in gear and drove toward the baggage route.